The aliens thought victory was certain. Then Earth turned their fleet into ashes. Admiral Jack Morrison stood at the large window of Space Command headquarters, his weathered face reflected in the glass as he stared at the night sky. The stars looked the same as they always had, but everything had changed. The message had arrived 18 hours ago. They were no longer alone in the universe. "Admiral, the Security Council is waiting," said a young lieutenant, standing nervously at the door. Jack nodded, taking one last look at the peaceful sky before following the lieutenant down the long corridor. In the command center, screens displayed the object that had appeared near Jupiter's orbit yesterday, a massive ship unlike anything humans had ever built. General Olivia Bennett looked up from her tablet as Jack entered. "They've sent another message." The room fell silent as the alien communication played on the main screen. The translation software had improved since the first contact, but the message remained just as chilling. "People of Earth, we are the Krelthak. Your planet has resources we require. You will surrender your world to us. Resistance is futile. You have 24 hours to reply." "Well, they're certainly not beating around the bush," Jack said, his voice steady, despite the fear gripping his chest. "What's our status?" Olivia's face was grim. "We've mobilized every military asset we have. Space Force has positioned our orbital platforms, but..." She didn't need to finish. "Earth's most advanced weapons would be like throwing rocks at a tank." "What about Project Daedalus?" Jack asked. Dr. Alan Wright stood up from his seat at the far end of the table. The scientist looked like he hadn't slept in days, his gray hair standing on end. "The prototype isn't ready. We need at least another month." "We have 24 hours, Jack reminded him. "Then we'll have to find another way," Alan said, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. The next day, Jack stood beside the president in the White House Situation Room as she prepared to deliver Earth's response. Looking at the faces around him, he saw the weight of their decision. They had debated through the night. Surrender wasn't an option, but fighting seemed hopeless. "Madam President, it's time," the communications director said. The president straightened her jacket and faced the camera. "To the representatives of the Krelthak, I speak on behalf of all nations of Earth. We are a peaceful planet, but we will not surrender our home. We propose a meeting to discuss how our worlds might coexist." Before she could finish, alarm bells blared. The defense secretary's phone rang, and his face went pale as he listened. "They're here," he said, hanging up. Hundreds of ships just appeared in orbit. Within minutes, reports flooded in from around the world. The Krelthak hadn't waited for their answer. Dark, angular ships filled the skies over major cities. The orbital defense platforms fired their weapons, but the alien ships absorbed the blasts without slowing. "Get the president to the bunker," Jack ordered as the building shook. Through the window, he saw a massive shadow pass over the White House lawn. Alan grabbed Jack's arm. "We need to get to Colorado. My research facility." The world outside exploded in blinding light. Jack shielded his eyes as windows shattered around them. When he looked again, the Washington Monument was gone, replaced by a smoking crater. "This way," Jack said, pulling Alan toward the underground evacuation route. They made it to the presidential transport helicopter on the south lawn, just as another explosion rocked the White House. The pilot took off, weaving between the alien ships that hung in the air like giant metal predators. "What's in Colorado that's so important?" Jack asked once they were airborne. Alan pulled a small drive from his pocket. "Project Prometheus. It's theoretical, but it might be our only chance." Jack looked out the window as they flew over burning neighborhoods. "Tell me." "The Krelthak ships emit a unique energy signature. I've been studying it since they appeared. Their technology relies on quantum fields that link their entire fleet together." Another explosion rocked the helicopter. Below them, tanks fired at a hovering alien craft, their shells bouncing harmlessly off its hull. "In simple terms," Alan continued, clutching his seat as the helicopter banked sharply, "they're all connected. Hit one the right way, you might hit them all." The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Sir, we're being pursued." Jack looked back to see 3 small alien crafts gaining on them. Evasive maneuvers, Get us to Andrews Air Force Base. The helicopter dived, skimming over the trees of Rock Creek Park. The alien crafts followed, firing energy beams that sliced through the air around them. We're not going to make it to Andrews, the pilot shouted as warning lights flashed across the control panel. There, Jack pointed to a stretch of highway cleared of cars by the chaos. Put us down. The helicopter landed roughly on the asphalt. Jack helped Alan out as the rotor blades slowed. What now? Alan asked, ducking as the alien craft circled overhead. Jack pointed to an abandoned SUV with government plates. We drive, as they sped away. The helicopter exploded behind them, hit by alien fire. Jack navigated through streets filled with panicked people and burning vehicles. The world is falling apart, Alan whispered, watching a family run from their collapsed home. Not yet, Jack replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Not while we're still here. They drove west for hours, the radio bringing reports of devastation from across the globe. New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, all under attack. Conventional weapons had no effect on the alien ships. The death toll was already in the millions. By nightfall, they had reached the outskirts of Pittsburgh. The city burned on the horizon, alien ships hovering over the flames like vultures. We need to keep moving, Jack said, turning onto a side road to avoid a military checkpoint. If they've taken over command, they'll be looking for survivors. From the government. Alan nodded, clutching his precious drive. My facility is underground beneath an old missile silo in the Rockies. If we can get there, I can start working on Prometheus. And if Prometheus works? Alan looked out at the burning city. Then we might have a chance. A small one. Jack checked the fuel gauge. Half full. It would have to be enough to get them to the next town. A small chance is better than none. They drove in silence, passing scenes of destruction and fleeing civilians. The Krelthak had come to claim Earth, and in just one day, they had brought humanity to its knees. But as they passed a group of soldiers helping evacuate a small town, Jack felt a flicker of hope. Humanity wasn't surrendering. They would fight, adapt, and find a way. And maybe, just maybe, Alan's Project Prometheus would be the key. They think victory is certain, Jack said, glancing at the scientist. Let's prove them wrong. The aliens thought victory was certain. Then Earth turned their fleet into ashes. 3 months passed since the Krelthak arrived. Earth was a different planet now. Cities lay in ruins. Governments had fallen. Millions were dead. But humans were stubborn creatures. They refused to disappear quietly. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in an old missile silo converted to a secret base, Admiral Jack Morrison studied a map of Krelthak positions across North America. Red dots covered most major cities. Sir, Lieutenant Dixon is back, a young soldier said from the doorway. Jack looked up as Kate Dixon entered the room. She was covered in dirt and dried blood, her face thin from weeks of limited rations, but her eyes remained sharp and determined. Report, Jack said. Kate pulled a small device from her pocket and placed it on the table. We got what we needed. Recording of their shield frequencies during landing operations. Jack nodded. In the 3 months since Washington fell, Kate had proven herself the best scout they had. She could slip past alien patrols like a ghost. Any casualties? He asked. 2, Kate said, her voice flat. Ryan and Martinez didn't make it back. Patrol caught them at the extraction point. Jack closed his eyes briefly. Every loss hit hard. Their resistance group had started with over 200 military personnel and civilians. They were down to less than 150 now. Get some rest, he told Kate. Dr. Wright will want that data as soon as possible, but it can wait until you've cleaned up. Kate nodded and left. Jack stared at the small device on the table. It might contain the key to fighting back, or it might be another dead end. They had precious few resources to waste on failed experiments. In the makeshift lab 3 levels down, Dr. Alan Wright and engineer Susan Rodriguez worked on a collection of equipment salvaged from military bases and research facilities. Some of it was human technology. Some was scavenged from downed alien scout ships. Any word from Dixon's team? Alan asked when Jack entered. Jack placed the recording device on the workbench. Just came in, 2 casualties. Alan's face fell. I'm sorry. Was it worth it? That's for you to tell me, Jack replied. Susan picked up the device and connected it to their computer system. Data scrolled across the screen as the recording played. Her eyes widened. This is it? She whispered. Alan, look at this energy pattern. Alan leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. The fluctuation during atmospheric entry. It's just like we theorized. Jack looked between them. In English, please. Susan turned to him, excitement breaking through her exhaustion. The Krelthak ships use quantum entanglement for their shields. It's what makes them so strong. But during entry into our atmosphere, there's a brief moment when the shields recalibrate to the new environment. A weakness? Jack asked. More than that, Alan said. The entire fleet is connected through quantum fields. Their shields all operate on the same frequency. If we can disrupt the entanglement at the right moment, we could take down all their shields at once. Jack finished. Hope stirred in his chest for the first time in months. Exactly, Susan said. But we'd need to hit their command ship. That's what maintains the quantum coherence across the fleet. Jack nodded slowly. So we identify the command ship, hit it with this, what are we calling it? The Prometheus Protocol, Alan said. After the Titan who gave fire to humanity. Fitting, Jack said. But how do we deliver this fire to the gods? Susan walked to a large object covered with a tarp in the corner of the lab. She pulled the cover off, revealing a missile with modifications unlike anything Jack had seen before. We've been adapting one of our old nuclear delivery systems, she explained. Stripped out the warhead, replaced it with a quantum disruption device. Jack studied the weapon. Will it work? The theory is sound, Alan said. But we need more than theory. We need a test. Jack crossed his arms. A test would reveal our position. We'd have every Krelthak ship in Colorado coming down on us. Not necessarily, Susan said. We've identified a small patrol ship that regularly passes over Denver, if we can take it down with a localized version of the protocol. It would prove the concept without alerting the entire fleet, Alan finished. Jack considered it. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward. How soon can you be ready? 2 days, Alan said. We'll need Lieutenant Dixon's team again to place the device. 2 days later, Kate Dixon and 4 resistance fighters moved through the ruins of downtown Denver. The once proud city was now a shell, buildings torn open like gutted animals. Krelthak, patrol ships drifted overhead every few hours. There, Kate whispered, pointing to a tall office building that still had its upper floors intact. That's our spot. The team moved carefully, avoiding the alien ground patrols. The Krelthak had long since stopped looking for survivors in the city centers, focusing instead on the countryside where human resistance was strongest. Still, automated drones buzzed through the streets, scanning for signs of life. Davis, watch. The door, Kate ordered as they entered the building. Chen, with me. Peters and Wilson secure the stairwell. They climbed 23 floors, muscles burning from the effort. At the top, Kate and Chen set up the small device Alan had given them, a miniature version of the Prometheus protocol. Timer set, Chen said. 15 minutes until the patrol ship passes. Kate nodded. Let's move. They rejoined the others and worked their way back to street level. Outside, they took cover in an underground parking garage with a clear view of the sky. 5 minutes, Chen whispered, checking her watch. Kate's radio crackled. Base to Dixon, abort mission. Repeat, abort mission. Large Krelthak force detected moving your way. Kate grabbed her binoculars and scanned the sky. In the distance, she could see multiple alien ships approaching, far more than the single patrol they were expecting. Too late to retrieve the device, she told her team. New plan. We stay hidden, observe the effect, then report back. Minutes later, the alien patrol ship appeared, gliding slowly over the city. Behind it came 5 larger vessels, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Why so? Many, Wilson whispered. They must have detected something, Kate replied, her stomach knotting with fear. As the first ship passed over the building where they'd placed the device, a pulse of blue energy shot upward. It hit the ship's shield, which flickered momentarily. For a terrible second, nothing happened. Then the shield collapsed entirely and the ship dropped from the sky like a stone. The other Krelthak vessels scattered, their pilots clearly confused by the sudden failure. None of them fired on the building or sent ground forces to investigate. They simply retreated, as if afraid of catching the same mysterious ailment. It worked. Kate breathed. It actually worked. Back at the base, the news spread quickly. The test had succeeded beyond their expectations. Not only had they brought down the patrol ship, but the other vessels had fled rather than investigate. They're connected, but they don't understand how, Alan explained to Jack as they reviewed the footage Kate's team had brought back. When one ship's shields failed, the others retreated to prevent whatever caused it from spreading. Can we scale this up? Jack asked. Target their command ship? Alan nodded. We can, but we'll need to draw it into position first. Jack smiled grimly. Then it's time to set a trap. The aliens thought victory was certain. Then Earth turned their fleet into ashes. The abandoned missile silo buzzed with activity. The successful test in Denver had given everyone new energy. For the first time since the invasion, humans had a weapon that worked against the Krelthak. But Dr. Alan Wright knew they had only scratched the surface of what needed to be done. The patrol ship was small, Alan explained to Admiral Jack Morrison and the other resistance leaders. The command ship will be much larger with stronger shields. They stood around a table where Susan Rodriguez had built a model of the alien command ship based on satellite images. The massive vessel was shaped like a giant arrowhead, nearly 2 miles long. Can the Prometheus protocol handle something that big? Asked Jack. Alan nodded. The size doesn't matter. What matters is hitting the right spot. He pointed to a glowing section near the rear of the model. Their quantum field generator is here. That's our target. Major Frank Collins, their weapons. Expert studied the model. How do we deliver the protocol? Our missiles don't have the range to hit a ship in high orbit. Susan stepped forward. We've been working on that. There's one satellite left in orbit that the Krelthak haven't destroyed. It's an old weather platform, but we've hacked into it. With some modifications, we can use it to amplify and direct the protocol. We still need to get the command ship in range, Jack said. They keep it well back from Earth, smart move on their part. Lieutenant Kate Dixon, freshly returned from another scouting mission, spoke up. We've noticed a pattern. When they think they found a major resistance base, they bring in the big guns. The command ship moves into low orbit to coordinate the attack. So we need to convince them they've found our main base, Jack said slowly. A trap. Frank nodded. We make them think they've discovered where all the remaining human military forces are gathered. Something too tempting to ignore. Where do we set this trap? Asked Susan. Jack walked to the large map on the wall. Somewhere away from here. Somewhere we can control the battlefield. He studied the map for a moment, then pointed. Here. The old Air Force base in North Dakota. It's remote, mostly intact, and we can prepare the ground. Kate frowned. We don't have enough people to make it look like a main base. We don't need people, Alan said. We need heat signatures, radio traffic and movement, things their sensors will detect. Decoys, Frank said, nodding. We can rig vehicles with heat elements, set up automated radio transmitters. How long to set it up? Jack asked. 2 weeks, Susan answered, maybe less if we push it. Jack shook his head. We take our time and do it right. This is our one shot. The next day, small teams headed out to begin the work. Kate led the group to North Dakota, traveling only at night to avoid Krelthak patrols. They carried equipment to set up the fake base, along with the components Susan needed to build the delivery system for the Prometheus protocol. Back at the real base, Alan worked day and night to refine the protocol. The test in Denver had worked, but the command ship would require more power, more precision. You need to rest, Susan told him one night, finding him asleep at his workbench. Alan rubbed his eyes. I'll rest when the aliens are gone. Susan sat beside him. If you burn out now, they'll never be gone. Alan sighed. I keep thinking about all the people we've lost. My family was in Boston when it was hit. I don't know if they survived. Susan placed her hand on his. That's why we need to succeed for all of them. In North Dakota, Kate's team transformed the abandoned Air Force base. They set up hundreds of heat sources to mimic human bodies. They placed motion sensors that would trigger mechanical movement when the aliens scanned the area. They established a radio network that broadcast encrypted messages on military frequencies. It looks real, Kate said as they finished. She stood on a hill overlooking the base. Lights glowed in the buildings. Vehicles moved on programmed paths. To any observer, it appeared to be a major military installation. Let's hope the Krelthak think so too, replied Chen, her second in command. Kate checked her watch. Time to call it in. She used their secure line to contact the main base. The stage is set. We're ready when you are. Jack received the message with mixed feelings. If this worked, they might save Earth. If it failed, they would lose their best weapon. And any hope of victory? Send the signal, he ordered. Frank nodded and activated the system they had prepared. A powerful transmission burst from their communications array, aimed at the nearest Krelthak patrol. The message appeared to be accidentally unencrypted, revealing coordinates and troop numbers for the North Dakota base. Now we wait, Jack said. The wait was shorter than expected. Within 6 hours, their sensors detected increased Krelthak activity in orbit. Scout ships moved toward North Dakota. Larger vessels began to change position. They took the bait, Susan said, watching the radar display. Alan nodded. And here comes the big fish. The massive command ship had begun moving into lower orbit, positioning itself to oversee the attack on what it believed was the last major human military base. Activate the satellite, Jack ordered. Susan's fingers flew over her keyboard. Miles above Earth, the old weather satellite turned slowly, aiming its newly installed transmitter at the precise spot where the command ship would pass. Satellite in position, Susan reported. Ready to transmit the Prometheus protocol on your command. Jack looked at Alan. Will this work? Alan took a deep breath. The math is solid. The physics is sound. But we're doing something that's never been done before. Disrupting a quantum field on this scale. There could be side effects. What kind of side effects? Our own systems might be affected. Communications, power, anything that uses similar frequencies. Jack considered this. A small price to pay for freedom. In North Dakota, Kate and her team retreated to a safe distance from the base. They had set everything to run automatically. Now they watched as Krelthak ships appeared in the sky above the fake installation. Right on schedule, Kate said. She raised her radio. Target is in position. Repeat. Target is in position. At the main base, Jack received the message. He looked around at his team, at the tired faces that had fought so hard for this moment. Activate Prometheus, he ordered. Susan pressed the final key. The satellite fired its invisible beam at the Krelthak command ship, just as it moved into low orbit over North Dakota. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a flicker of blue light rippled across the massive alien vessel. The lights on its hull dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. It's working, Alan whispered. The quantum field is destabilizing. The effect spread from the command ship to the smaller vessels nearby. Their shields flickered and failed. Some began to drift, their engines suddenly dead. My God, Jack breathed. It's really working. The quantum cascade moved faster now, jumping from ship to ship through their entangled systems. Across the globe, humans looked up to see the mighty Krelthak fleet suddenly vulnerable. In North Dakota, Kate watched in awe as the ships above began to fall from the sky, breaking apart as they hit the atmosphere. We did it, she said, her voice barely audible over the roar of the dying alien fleet. The battle wasn't over. The Prometheus protocol had struck the first blow. But the war to reclaim Earth was just beginning. The aliens thought victory was certain. Then Earth turned their fleet into ashes. The success of the Prometheus protocol changed everything. Within hours of the command ship's destruction, Krelthak forces around the world fell into chaos. Without central coordination, their once perfect military machine broke down into isolated units. Lieutenant Kate Dixon watched from her observation point as alien ships crashed across the Dakota plains. Some exploded on impact, others simply crumpled, their strange metals twisting as they hit the ground. "Base to Dixon," her radio crackled. "What's your status?" Kate lifted the radio to her lips. "Dixon to base. It's raining aliens out here. The protocol worked better than we hoped." Back at the main base in the Rockies, Admiral Jack Morrison allowed himself a moment of celebration. Cheers echoed through the underground facility as news of their success spread. But Jack knew better than to declare victory too soon. "Status report," he ordered, bringing the command room back to focus. Susan Rodriguez studied her monitors. The quantum cascade affected approximately 80% of their fleet. The ships that were more distant from the command vessel seem to have survived. "How many?" Jack asked. "Hard to tell," Susan replied. "Maybe 200 ships worldwide. Most have entered a defensive formation high in orbit." Dr. Alan Wright entered the room, looking exhausted but triumphant. "The protocol exceeded our projections. The quantum disruption spread through their network like a virus. Can we do it again?" Jack asked. Alan shook his head. "Not immediately. The satellite we used burned out from the power surge. And the Krelthak will adapt. They'll change their quantum frequencies, add safeguards. So we hit them while they're disorganized," Major Frank Collins suggested. "We have conventional weapons that can damage their ships now that their shields are down." Jack nodded. "Coordinate with all resistance cells. Target any grounded Krelthak ships. Salvage what technology you can." As orders went out to resistance groups worldwide, Kate and her team approached one of the downed alien vessels. The ship had landed mostly intact, its sleek hull now scarred and broken in places. "Stay alert," Kate warned her team. "There could be survivors." They moved carefully around the ship, weapons ready. A sudden sound made them freeze. A section of the hull slid open, and a figure stumbled out. It was their first clear look at a Krelthak. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, its body covered in what looked like flexible armor. Its head was elongated, with 4 glowing eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. It had no visible mouth, just a series of vibrating membranes where a human mouth would be. The alien raised a weapon, but Chen fired first. The Krelthak fell, its strange blood pooling beneath it. "Check the ship," Kate ordered. "Secure any survivors, but I want one alive if possible." Inside the vessel, they found 2 more Krelthak. One was dead, crushed by equipment that had broken, loose during the crash. The other was injured but conscious. Kate ordered it restrained and prepared for transport. "Base, this is Dixon," she reported. "We have a prisoner and an intact ship, requesting extraction." At the base, preparations were made to receive the captured alien. Alan and Susan set up a secure containment area in one of the lower levels. They had never had the opportunity to study a living Krelthak before. Jack met Kate's team when they arrived with their prisoner. The alien had been sedated for transport, but was now regaining consciousness. "Has it said anything?" Jack asked. Kate shook her head. "Not in any way we can understand." The Krelthak was placed in the containment area. It immediately moved to the furthest corner, watching the humans with its 4 eyes. "How do we communicate with it?" Jack asked. "We've been working on a translation algorithm based on their transmissions," Susan explained. "It's basic, but it might work." Alan approached the transparent barrier separating them from the alien. "Can you understand us?" he asked. The alien made no response. Susan activated her device. It produced a series of clicks and vibrations, approximating what they had identified as the Krelthak language. The alien's head snapped toward the sound. It replied with similar noises. "What did it say?" Jack asked. Susan studied her screen. "It's asking if we're going to kill it. Tell it we won't harm it if it cooperates," Jack said. Susan relayed the message. The alien seemed to consider this, then responded with a longer series of sounds. It says its name is... The closest translation would be Venkar, Susan reported. It's asking how we disabled their ships. Don't answer that, Jack said quickly. Ask why they attacked Earth. The exchange continued for several minutes. Venkar became more talkative as it realized it wasn't going to be immediately executed. This is interesting, Susan said after one response. It says the attack on Earth wasn't their choice. They were following orders from something called the High Command. Ask where this High Command is, Jack instructed. When Susan translated the answer, her eyes widened. Not where what? The High Command isn't a place or even a group. It's an artificial intelligence. It runs their entire civilization. An AI? Alan asked, suddenly interested. They're controlled by a machine? Susan continued translating. Not exactly controlled, more like directed. The High Command calculates the most efficient path for their species' survival and expansion. It determined that Earth's resources were needed. And they just follow its instructions without question? Jack asked. Susan relayed the question. Venkar's response was lengthy. It says questioning the High Command would be like our cells questioning our brain, Susan translated. It's not seen as a separate entity, but as part of their collective consciousness. Alan leaned closer to the barrier. Ask it what happens now that the command ship is destroyed. The alien's answer was short this time. It says, the High Command will send more ships. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. How many more? When Susan translated the response, the room fell silent. Thousands, she whispered. It says the ships that attacked Earth were just an advance force. The main fleet is still coming. How long do we have? Jack asked. Susan relayed the question. Venkar's answer was precise. 82 Earth days, Susan translated. That's when the main fleet will arrive. Jack exchanged glances with Alan. Less than 3 months to prepare for an even larger invasion. Alan nodded grimly. We need to understand their technology better. The Prometheus protocol worked once, but they'll be ready for it next time. Then we need something they won't expect, Jack said. He turned to Susan. Ask our guest if it's willing to help us. In exchange for its life and eventual return to its people, we want information. Susan translated. Venkar considered the offer for a long moment, its 4 eyes. Blinking in sequence, finally it responded. It says yes, Susan reported. It will help us. Jack nodded. Then we have work to do. 82 days to prepare for the real war. Outside, resistance groups worldwide continued to tackle the remaining Krelthak forces. With their shields down and command structure broken, the aliens were vulnerable for the first time. Humans reclaimed cities and gathered alien technology. But in the vast darkness of space, beyond the orbit of Jupiter, the main Krelthak fleet was already adjusting its course. Earth had won a battle, but the war was just beginning. The aliens thought victory was certain. Then Earth turned their fleet into ashes. The days turned into weeks as Earth prepared for the arrival of the main Krelthak fleet. Admiral Jack Morrison watched humanity rebuild with a speed he never thought possible. With the help of Venkar, their alien prisoner, humans began to understand and adapt Krelthak technology. Dr. Alan Wright and Susan Rodriguez worked day and night with engineers from around the world. They studied the intact ships, learning how the alien weapons and shields functioned. More importantly, they learned about the High Command, the artificial intelligence that controlled the Krelthak civilization. The High Command isn't just an AI, Alan explained during a strategy meeting. It's a quantum computer that exists, partly in our dimension and partly in another. That's why our Prometheus protocol worked so well, Susan added. We didn't just disrupt their shields. We temporarily cut off their connection to the High Command. Jack frowned. But you said we can't use that trick again. Venkar, who now wore a translation device around its neck, spoke up. The High Command adapts. It learns from failure. The main fleet will have new protections. Over the weeks, Venkar had become an unlikely ally. At first, many humans had wanted the alien executed. But its knowledge had proven too valuable, and gradually a strange trust had formed. "So what's our plan?" asked Lieutenant Kate Dixon. She had been promoted to major after her successful missions. Alan stood and activated a holographic display, technology adapted from a Krelthak ship. "We can't attack their ships directly, but thanks to what Venkar has told us, we now understand how the High Command communicates with its fleet." The hologram showed a complex network of energy patterns. "The High Command sends instructions through quantum channels," Susan explained. "These can't be blocked or intercepted in normal space." "But," Alan continued, "we've discovered that the High Command needs to establish a local node when operating in a new star system, a physical anchor point for its consciousness." "In simple terms," Jack said, "the High Command needs to set up a base of operations when it gets here." "Exactly," Alan nodded. "And we believe it will use the largest ship in the fleet for this purpose." "So we target that ship," Kate suggested. "Not exactly," Alan replied. "We let the High Command establish its node. Then we don't attack it. We communicate with it." Murmurs of surprise filled the room. Venkar's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of agitation they had come to recognize. "The High Command does not negotiate with lesser species." "We're not going to negotiate," Susan said. "We're going to introduce it to someone new." She typed a command and the hologram changed to show a complex web of code. "We've been developing our own AI. We call it Athena, after the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare." "An AI to fight their AI?" Jack asked skeptically. "Not to fight," Alan corrected. "To talk. The High Command makes decisions based on logic and efficiency. It ordered the attack on Earth because it calculated that was the optimal path for Krelthak survival. We believe Athena can present alternative calculations," Susan said. "Show the High Command that cooperation would be more efficient than conquest." Jack looked unconvinced. "And if this conversation doesn't go well?" Alan and Susan exchanged glances. "Then we have a backup plan," Alan said. "But it's risky." The day of the Krelthak arrival came faster than anyone wanted. Earth's defenses were as ready as they could be. Salvaged alien ships had been modified for human use. New weapons had been developed based on Krelthak technology. Jack stood in the command center watching as the massive alien fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. There were thousands of ships, far more than the first invasion force. "They're coming in slower than the first fleet," Kate observed, more cautious. "They know we can fight back now," Jack replied. They watched as the fleet approached Mars, then stopped. A single enormous vessel, at least 5 times larger than anything they had seen before, separated from the others and continued toward Earth. "DQ. Command ship," Alan said. Just as Venkar predicted. The massive ship entered Earth orbit and took position above the Pacific Ocean. "They're establishing the node," Susan reported, monitoring her equipment. "The High Command is transferring its consciousness into the ship." "Get Athena ready," Jack ordered. Susan nodded and activated their AI system. "Athena is online and ready to transmit." "What about the backup plan?" Jack asked. Alan checked his tablet. "In position and ready, but let's hope we don't need it." Susan established the connection between Athena and the Krelthak command ship. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. There was no way to monitor the communication between the two artificial intelligences. Then the command ship began to move. It shifted position, aligning itself directly over the Pacific. "What's happening?" Jack demanded. "I don't know," Susan admitted. "Athena is still communicating, but..." She was cut off as all their systems suddenly went dark. Emergency lights came on as backup power activated. "They're attacking!" someone shouted. "No," Venkar said, its voice calm. "This is different." Outside, a strange light began to emanate from the command ship. It spread outward in a sphere encompassing the Earth. But unlike the destructive beams of the first invasion, this light passed through buildings and people harmlessly. The power came back on. On the monitors, they could see the rest of the Krelthak fleet beginning to move away from Earth back toward deep space. "They're leaving?" Kate asked, confused. Susan's computer beeped. "I'm receiving a message from Athena." Text scrolled across her screen. Everyone gathered to read it. "The High Command has recalculated," Susan read aloud. "Athena showed it that humans and Krelthak share compatible goals. Both species seek survival and advancement. Cooperation offers a 78.3% higher efficiency rating than conquest." "They're not attacking because of better math?" Jack asked incredulously. "The High Command exists only to ensure the optimal future for the Krelthak," Venkar explained. "It has no ego, no pride. If cooperation is more efficient than war, it will choose cooperation." "What was that light?" Kate asked. "A quantum entanglement field," Alan said, checking his instruments. "Non-destructive. It appears to be a communication network. The High Command is offering to share technology and knowledge." Jack shook his head in disbelief. "So after all that, we're going to be allies?" "Not immediately," Venkar cautioned. "But the path is open. The High Command sees potential in humans that it did not see before." In the days that followed, the Krelthak fleet maintained its distance, while preliminary communications were established. Venkar became the official liaison between the two species. 1 month after the fleet's arrival, Jack found Alan and Susan on the roof of their base, looking up at the night sky where Krelthak ships now moved in peaceful patterns. "Did you ever think it would end this way?" Jack asked. "Not really," Alan admitted. "I was pretty sure we were all going to die." "What convinced the High Command to change its mind?" Jack asked. "Really?" Susan smiled. "Athena showed it something it had never considered before." "What's that?" "Creativity," she said. "The High Command is logical, efficient, but it follows predictable paths. Humans are messy, illogical, but we create solutions no computer would ever devise." "Like turning a weather satellite into a weapon," Alan added. "Or trusting an enemy alien," Jack said, glancing at Venkar, who stood a respectful distance away. The Krelthak turned its 4 eyes toward them. "The High Command believed victory was certain," it said in its strange voice. "It did not account for human ingenuity." Jack looked up at the stars, thinking of all they had lost and all they might yet gain. "That's always been our greatest strength. When pushed to the edge, we find a way to survive." Around the world, humans looked up at the once threatening alien fleet and wondered what the future would bring. There was still rebuilding to do, trust to build, and wounds to heal. But for the first time since the Krelthak appeared, they looked to the future with hope instead of fear. The aliens had thought victory was certain, but humanity had turned their certainty to ashes. And from those ashes, something new was beginning to grow.